The storm hit remote station Echo 7 with the fury of an angry god, battering the reinforced walls with sheets of metallic rain that sounded like bullets against the composite hull. Jonah Cross barely looked up from the satellite array he was repairing, his weathered hands steady despite the chaos outside. 23 years of solitary life on this forgotten outpost had taught him that the universe didn't care about his comfort. It only cared about function. Another crash of thunder, this one different, deeper, more focused. Jonah's head snapped, up, his gray eyes scanning the storm through the observation port. Lightning illuminated the barren landscape in stark, violent flashes, revealing nothing but twisted metal debris from decades of failed missions. But that sound hadn't been thunder. He'd heard enough ships crash over the years to know the difference. Setting down his plasma torch, he grabbed the emergency scanner from the workbench. The device crackled to life, its screen painting ghostly green signatures across the storm. There, 2 kilometers northeast. Heat signature fading fast, but definitely artificial. A ship, and not one of the usual human freight haulers that occasionally limped to his station for repairs. Damn it all, Jonah muttered, pulling on his weatherproof coat. Protocol demanded he report any crashes to the Galactic Transit Authority, but the nearest GTA outpost was 3 days away by hypercom. Whatever was out there would be dead or gone long before help arrived. The storm fought him every step of the way as he mounted his all-terrain crawler and headed into the maelstrom. Rain hammered his visor, and the wind threatened to overturn the small vehicle more than once. But Jonah had survived worse nights than this, and something about the crash nagged at him. The heat signature had been too controlled, too precise. This wasn't some mechanical failure. Someone had piloted that ship down deliberately. He found the wreckage in a shallow crater, steam rising from twisted alien metal that definitely wasn't human in origin. The ship was sleek, predatory, with lines that spoke of speed and violence. Definitely military, and definitely not from any fleet he recognized. Warning lights flickered weakly along its hull, casting eerie shadows through the rain. Movement caught his eye near the ship's rear section. Jonah approached cautiously, hand instinctively moving to the plasma cutter on his belt. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. What he found made him freeze in place. She was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with skin that seemed to shimmer between deep blue and silver in the lightning flashes. Her features were sharp, angular, undeniably alien, yet somehow familiar, like seeing humanity reflected through a funhouse mirror. Blood, dark as oil, seeped from a gash along her left temple, and her breathing was labored. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Golden, intelligent, and absolutely lethal. Even wounded and on the ground, she radiated the kind of authority that could command armies or destroy worlds. Human, she said, her voice a low rasp that somehow cut through the storm. She spoke perfect, standard, though her accent was unlike anything he'd heard. I know what you are thinking. Call your authorities. Collect whatever bounty my enemies have placed on my head. Jonah knelt beside her, medical training overriding caution. The wound looked serious, but not fatal. Yet. I'm thinking you're bleeding. To death in my backyard, he replied, pulling emergency medical supplies from his kit. Everything else is secondary. She studied him with those unsettling golden eyes as he worked, cleaning and sealing the wound with practiced efficiency. You are different from what I expected. Yeah. Well, you're not exactly what I was hoping to find tonight either. Jonah helped her sit up against a piece of debris. Can you walk? My station's not far, but we need to move before hypothermia sets in. The alien woman, clearly a soldier of some kind given her bearing and the weapons harness across her chest, struggled to her feet with his assistance. She was strong, he realized. Even injured, she moved with lethal grace. My name is Kira Velthon, she said as they made their way slowly back to the crawler. I was, General of the 3rd Expansion Fleet of the Altarian Empire. Jonah Cross. And you're a long way from Altarian space. She was quiet for a moment as he helped her into the vehicle. I am no longer welcome in Altarian space. My family line has been discontinued by Imperial decree. The weight in her words told Jonah everything he needed to know about galactic politics. Another coup, another purge, another cycle of violence among the stars. He'd seen enough refugees over the years to recognize the pattern. As they drove back through the storm, Kira spoke again, her voice stronger now. I require sanctuary, Jonah Cross. Hide me from those who hunt me, and I will give you something no human has ever possessed. Something that will change your small, forgotten world forever. Jonah glanced at her through the rain-streaked cockpit. And what exactly would that be? Her golden eyes met his, and for a moment, he saw something vulnerable beneath the warrior's mask. Hope, she said simply, and the stars themselves. The storm continued to rage around them as they approached the station, but Jonah found himself thinking less about the weather and more about the strange, dangerous woman beside him. Whatever she was offering, whatever secret she carried, his quiet life was about to become significantly more complicated, and despite every instinct screaming at him to be cautious, he found himself looking forward to it. 3 days passed in tense silence before the first patrol ships appeared on Jonah's long-range scanners. Sleek, angular vessels that moved with predatory grace across the star field, their hulls bearing markings he didn't recognize but instinctively feared. Kira had spent most of those days recovering in the station's small medical bay, her alien physiology healing at a rate that amazed him. Hunters, she said simply, when he showed her the scanner readings. She stood beside him at the observation deck, her tall frame casting long shadows in the dim light. The medical nanites had done their work well. The gash on her temple was now just a thin silver line, and her golden eyes had regained their sharp intensity. Yours? Jonah asked, adjusting the scanner's frequency to get a better read on their configuration. My uncle's. The words carried the weight of betrayal. Admiral Thane Velthon, my father's brother. He orchestrated the coup that destroyed my family. Now he sends his dogs to finish what he started. Jonah studied her profile as she watched the ships patrol the outer system. Over the past few days, he'd learned fragments of her story. How her father's progressive policies toward lesser species had made enemies among the old guard. How the military elite had turned against their own bloodline for the promise of renewed conquest. Why run? He asked. You're obviously a skilled commander. Why not fight back? Kira's laugh was bitter. With what forces? Thane controls the fleet now. My loyal officers are dead or imprisoned. I barely escaped with my life and... She paused, her hand moving unconsciously to a sealed compartment on her belt. And something far more valuable than my life. The thing you promised me. She turned to face him fully, and Jonah felt that familiar flutter in his chest that had been growing. Stronger each day, there was something about her that drew him. Not just her exotic beauty or dangerous grace, but the sharp intelligence behind those golden eyes, the way she moved with controlled power even in rest. The Velthon Codex, she said quietly. Star, maps created by my ancestors over 10,000 years ago. They show the locations of worlds beyond the galactic rim, planets untouched by any civilization, rich with resources and possibilities. Knowledge that could make a person, or a species, nigh incredibly powerful. Jonah whistled low. And you're willing to share this with a nobody mechanic on a forgotten outpost? You are not nobody, Jonah Cross. She stepped closer, close enough, that he could smell the subtle alien scent of her skin, something like ozone and starlight. You could have turned me over to those ships, could have claimed whatever bounty Thane has placed on my head. Instead, you gave me sanctuary without asking for payment. Basic human decency isn't exactly rare. It is rarer than you know. Her hand touched his arm, and he felt warmth spread from the contact. In my experience, most beings act only from self-interest. You are different. The scanner beeped urgently, drawing their attention back to the display. The patrol ships were moving closer, their search pattern tightening around the system's inner planets. How long before they find us? Jonah asked. Hours, perhaps less. My ship's emergency beacon was damaged but not destroyed. They will triangulate its signal eventually. Jonah made a decision that surprised even him. There's an old mining complex about 50 kilometers underground. Pre-war construction, shielded from most scans. We can hide there until they move on. Kira studied him intently. You would risk your life for a stranger? An alien stranger who has brought danger to your doorstep? Maybe I'm curious about those star maps, he said, trying to keep his tone light. But the truth was more complicated. Over the past 3 days, he'd found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't expected. Their conversations during her recovery had revealed a sharp wit and surprising depth. She spoke of worlds he'd never imagined, of politics and philosophy that spanned solar systems. More than that, he'd caught her watching him work with something like appreciation in those golden eyes. When she'd asked him to explain human engineering principles, she'd listened with genuine interest, her questions revealing a technical knowledge that matched his own. Very well, she said softly. But understand, once we descend into those tunnels together, there will be no turning back. The Codex carries obligations as well as opportunities. Those who possess its secrets become targets of every power in the galaxy. Sounds exciting, Jonah replied, though his heart was racing. Let me gather some supplies. As they prepared for the journey underground, Kira helped him pack emergency rations and equipment. Their hands brushed as they worked, small moments of contact that sent electricity through him. He caught her watching him more than once, her alien features softened by something that looked almost like affection. Jonah, she said as they prepared to leave the station. When we reach the tunnels, I will show you the Codex. But first, you should know what it truly represents, which is the last hope of my bloodline. The Velthon were explorers before we became conquerors. The Codex contains the locations of worlds where my people could start again, free from the corruption that destroyed our empire. She paused, her golden eyes meeting his. Worlds where humans and Altarians might build something new together. The implications of her words hung in the air between them as they descended into the abandoned mining complex. In the dim emergency lighting of the tunnels, Kira seemed to glow with an inner light, her alien beauty both exotic and achingly familiar. As the heavy blast doors sealed behind them, cutting them off from the world above, Jonah realized he was no longer just hiding a fugitive. He was about to become part of something that could reshape the relationship between species, if they survived long enough to see it through. The patrol ships continued their search above, unaware that their quarry was beginning to trust a human with secrets that could change the galaxy forever. The mining tunnels stretched for kilometers in every direction, a labyrinth of passages carved from living stone by machines that had fallen silent decades before Jonah was born. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls as he and Kira made their way deeper into the complex, seeking chambers far enough from the surface to avoid detection. They found sanctuary in what had once been a geologist's laboratory, complete with mineral analysis equipment and a small living area. Dust covered everything, but the air recyclers still functioned, and the space was mercifully warm after the chill of the upper tunnels. This will do, Kira said, setting down her pack. In the soft light, her blue-silver skin seemed to shimmer, and Jonah found himself staring longer than was polite. Over the past week, his fascination with her had grown beyond mere curiosity. The way she moved, the way her golden eyes lit up when she was thinking. It was becoming harder to ignore the attraction building between them. How long do you think? They'll search? He asked, activating the lab's communication array to monitor surface transmissions. Days, perhaps weeks. Thane is nothing if not thorough. Kira settled onto one of the lab's benches, her long legs folding gracefully beneath her. We may be here for some time. The thought didn't displease him as much as it should have. Well, at least now I can get that explanation about the Codex. Kira reached for the sealed compartment on her belt, her movements reverent. What she withdrew looked like a crystal cylinder, no larger than her palm, filled with swirling patterns of light that seemed to pulse with their own life. 10,000 years of exploration, she said softly, holding the device between them. My ancestors mapped the galaxy when your species was still learning to make fire. Every habitable world beyond the rim, every resource deposit, every navigational Hazard, all encoded in quantum crystal matrices. Jonah leaned closer, fascinated by the way the light patterns shifted and flowed. It's beautiful and dangerous. Wars have been fought over fragments of this knowledge. Entire civilizations have risen and fallen trying to claim what my family guarded. She activated the device, and suddenly, the air above them filled with a three-dimensional star map of breathtaking complexity. But look here. Do you see these markers? She gestured to a cluster of golden points beyond the galactic edge, far from any known shipping lanes or colonial territories, worlds that could support both human and Altarian life, rich in resources suitable for terraforming, places where survivors of our respective species could build something new. Respective survivors? Jonah asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Did you think my uncle's ambitions stopped with my family? The old guard wants to return to the expansion wars. Your Earth colonies will be among the first targets once Thane consolidates power. Her golden eyes met his. But these worlds, they could be sanctuaries, places where our people could coexist instead of destroying each other. The implications were staggering. Jonah studied the star map, trying to process what she was offering. You're talking about Exodus-level colonization. That would take massive resources, coordinated planning, and trust between species that have never truly attempted cooperation. Kira deactivated the Codex, the star map fading. It would require leaders on both sides willing to take extraordinary risks. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of possibility settling between them. Finally, Jonah spoke. What was your life like before all this, before the coup? Kira's expression softened. Lonely, if I'm honest. Command is isolating. Few dare to speak freely to a general, and fewer still see beyond the uniform to the person beneath. She studied his face in the dim light. What about you? This outpost seems like an unusual choice for someone with your skills. I used to work the core worlds. Big projects, lots of people, constant noise. Jonah found himself sharing more than he'd intended. After my parents died in a transport accident, I couldn't handle the crowds anymore. Too many reminders of what I'd lost. Out here, it's just me and the work. Solitude can be both blessing and curse, Kira said softly. I understand the appeal of avoiding pain, but isolation carries its own dangers. Such as forgetting how to connect with others, how to trust, how to... She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. How to open oneself to new possibilities. Their eyes met and held, and Jonah felt the air between them charge with unspoken tension. Over the past week, he'd found himself noticing everything about her. The way she tilted her head when thinking, the grace of her movements, the surprising gentleness in her voice when she spoke of lost things. Kira, he said quietly. What happens when this is over? When the patrol ships leave and you're free to go? I don't know, she admitted. For the first time in my life, I have no orders to follow, no fleet to command. The future is... She searched for the word. Uncertain. Maybe uncertainty isn't always bad. She smiled then, the first truly unguarded expression he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, making her seem younger, more vulnerable. You have an unusual perspective on things, Jonah Cross. Yeah, well, you're not exactly typical yourself. As if drawn by invisible forces, they found themselves sitting closer together on the bench. Kira's hand rested near his on the metal surface, and when their fingers brushed, neither pulled away. This is complicated, she said softly. Most worthwhile things are. My people and yours, we've never been allies, barely even trading partners. Maybe it's time that changed. She turned to face him fully, her golden eyes searching his face. You would truly consider it? Leaving everything you know to help build something unprecedented? With the right partner, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The space between them seemed to shrink until he could feel the warmth of her breath on his skin. Her hand covered his completely, her touch sending electricity through his nervous system. Jonah, she whispered, and he heard 1,000 unspoken possibilities in the way she said his name. When she leaned closer, he met her halfway, their lips meeting in a kiss that tasted of starlight and promises. Her mouth was soft, warmer than human, and when she sighed against him, he felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of the universe. They broke apart slowly, foreheads touching, breathing the same air in the quiet darkness of their hidden sanctuary. "This changes everything," she said softly. "I know," he replied and kissed her again. The proximity alarms screamed through the mining complex just after dawn, their shrill warning echoing off stone walls like the cries of dying birds. Jonah bolted upright from where he'd been sleeping beside Kira, their bodies having gravitated together during the night in unconscious seeking of warmth and comfort. "They found us," Kira said, already moving with military precision as she gathered their scattered equipment. Her golden eyes were alert, deadly. The tender woman who had kissed him in the darkness transformed back into the feared general. "Seismic sensors. They're mapping the tunnel system." Jonah checked the surface monitors, his heart sinking at what he saw. 3 patrol ships had landed near the old mining entrance, and figures in powered armor were rappelling into the complex. "How long do we have?" "Minutes, not hours." Kira sealed the codex back in its protective case, her movements economical and swift. "Is there another way out?" "The old transport tubes. They connect to a geothermal plant about 20 kilometers east." Jonah was already pulling on his gear, muscle memory taking over despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "But they haven't been used in decades. No guarantee they're still intact. Better than waiting for Thane's assassins to find us." They moved through the tunnels with practiced stealth, Kira's military training complementing Jonah's intimate knowledge of the complex's layout. Behind them, the sound of heavy boots and scanning equipment grew steadily closer. Twice they had to press themselves into maintenance alcoves as search teams passed nearby, their helmet lights sweeping the darkness like mechanical eyes. The transport tube entrance was sealed behind a blast door that had been locked for 30 years. Jonah worked frantically with his plasma cutter while Kira watched their backtrail, her alien weapon, something that looked like crystallized lightning, humming with deadly energy. "Jonah," she said softly, as sparks flew from the door's locking mechanism. "If we don't make it out of here, we will." "If we don't," she continued, pressing something into his hand, a smaller crystal warm to the touch. "This contains partial star charts, enough to find the nearest sanctuary world. Promise me you'll use it." He looked into her golden eyes, seeing fear there for the first time since he'd found her in the storm. Not fear of death, fear of leaving things unfinished, unspoken. "We're both getting out of here," he said firmly, "together." The blast door groaned open just as energy weapons discharged somewhere behind them. Thane's soldiers had found their abandoned camp. The transport tube stretched into darkness, its magnetic levitation rails corroded but still functional according to Jonah's scanner. They climbed into the maintenance pod he'd jury-rigged, a cramped space that forced them close together as the primitive propulsion system engaged. "This is insane," Kira breathed as they accelerated through the tunnel, emergency lighting flashing past in strobing patterns. "You have a better idea?" "Actually, yes." She was working with her weapon, adjusting settings with practiced efficiency. "When we reach the geothermal plant, they'll be waiting. Standard tactical doctrine. Establish perimeter, control all exits." "So what do you suggest?" Her smile was predatory, the expression of someone who had won battles against impossible odds. "We don't run from them, we go through them." The transport pod emerged into the geothermal plant's receiving bay, with a shower of sparks and the screech of failing brakes. Through the facility's windows, Jonah could see 2 patrol ships hovering in defensive positions, their weapons trained on the building. "Stay low," Kira whispered. But even as she spoke, the main doors exploded inward and armored figures poured through the breach. What followed was unlike anything Jonah had ever experienced. Kira moved like liquid death, her weapon painting the air with lines of coherent energy that cut through armor and stone with equal ease. She used the plant's machinery as cover, turning the industrial landscape into a 3-dimensional battlefield where she held every advantage. But there were two, many of them, and more were coming through the doors every second. The thermal vents, Jonah shouted over the weapons fire. If we can reach the external maintenance platform, covered by the ships above, Kira replied, dropping two more soldiers with precise shots. We need a distraction. Jonah looked at the geothermal plant's main control panel, understanding flooding through him. The pressure release valves. If I overload the system, you'll turn this entire facility into a steam bomb. Exactly. In the confusion, you could die. So could you. He was already moving toward the controls, Kira providing covering fire, as energy bolts sizzled past his head. Trust me. Their eyes met across the chaotic battlefield, and in that moment, Jonah saw everything they could be together. Partners, lovers, pioneers of a new kind of relationship between their species. But first they had to survive. I trust you, she said, and the simple words carried more weight than any declaration of love. Jonah's hands flew over the controls, rerouting power and overriding safety protocols with the desperate skill of someone who understood machines at their most fundamental level. Behind him, Kira's weapon sang its deadly song, keeping their attackers at bay through sheer force of will and superior tactics. The plant began to shudder, pressure building beyond safe parameters. Steam vented from emergency ports, filling the air with superheated mist that would blind sensors and force the patrol ships to pull back. Now! Jonah shouted. They ran together through the industrial maze, leaping over pipes and ducking beneath overhead machinery as the facility shook itself apart around them. The maintenance platform was exactly where Jonah remembered, jutting out over the rocky canyon that housed the plant's thermal tap. Behind them, the plant erupted in a geyser of steam and superheated water that reached toward the sky like a pillar of white fire. The patrol ships were forced to retreat, their sensors useless in the thermal chaos. On the platform, pressed against each other in the aftermath of violence and desperation, Kira turned to him with eyes that burned brighter than stars. You magnificent, impossible human, she breathed, and kissed him with a passion that tasted of danger and victory. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she looked into his eyes with an expression that was part warrior, part woman, entirely alien and completely his. I need you, she said simply. Not just as an ally, not just as a friend. I need you, Jonah Cross. You have me, he replied, meaning it with every fiber of his being. In the shadow of the steam cloud, with their enemies temporarily blinded and their hearts racing from battle and desire, they found each other with desperate hands and hungry mouths. Her skin was fever-warm beneath his touch, alien but perfect, and when she gasped his name against his throat, it sounded like a prayer. They made love on that platform above the canyon, surrounded by the chaos they had created. Their union fierce and tender and absolutely right. In that moment, species differences meant nothing. There was only the connection between two souls who had found something worth fighting for in each other. Afterward, holding her against him as the steam slowly cleared, Jonah knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The Codex, he said softly. Those sanctuary worlds you showed me, are you serious about trying to reach them? With the right partner, she said, echoing his earlier words. Are you ready to leave everything behind for the unknown? Jonah looked out over the alien landscape, thinking of his quiet life, his solitary existence, all the safe choices that had brought him to this moment. Then he looked at the extraordinary woman in his arms, the woman who had brought him star maps and adventure, and the possibility of love beyond anything he'd ever imagined. Let's go find ourselves a new world, he said. 6 months later, Jonah stood on the observation deck of the New Dawn, watching an uncharted sun rise over their destination world. The ship, assembled in secret from salvaged parts and powered by hybrid human-Altarian technology, had carried them beyond the galactic rim to a place that existed on no official star charts. Beautiful, isn't it? Kira said, joining him at the viewport. Her hand found his naturally, their fingers intertwining with the unconscious ease of lovers who had learned to move as one. The planet below was a masterpiece of blue oceans and green continents, unmarked by civilization, pristine as the day. It had formed. According to the Codex's detailed scans, it could support both human and Altarian life with minimal terraforming, a true sanctuary world. Hard to believe we made it, Jonah admitted. The past months had been a whirlwind of preparation, recruitment and narrow escapes. Word of their mission had spread through underground networks on both sides of the species divide, attracting refugees, outcasts, and idealists willing to risk everything for a chance at something new. I never doubted, Kira said, though her golden eyes held memories of the close calls they'd survived. Admiral Thane's forces had pursued them halfway across the galaxy before finally giving up the chase as hopeless. The established powers on both sides considered their venture naive at best, suicidal at worst. Behind them, the ship buzzed with activity as their unlikely crew prepared for planetfall. Humans and Altarians worked side by side, their initial mistrust gradually giving way to mutual respect and shared purpose. It wasn't perfect. There were still cultural misunderstandings and occasional conflicts, but it was progress. Contact from the surface team, announced Elena Vasquez, their human communications officer. Landing site Alpha is clear and optimal. They're requesting permission to begin establishing the first settlement. Jonah looked at Kira, seeing his own excitement reflected in her alien features. After months of planning and dreaming, they were finally here, about to become the founders of something that had never existed before. Permission granted, Kira said formally, then smiled. Tell them to name it whatever they like. This is their world now as much as ours. As the first shuttles launched toward the planet's surface carrying colonists and equipment for humanity's and the Altarians' most ambitious venture, Jonah reflected on how much his life had changed since that stormy night when a wounded general had crashed outside his outpost. No regrets? Kira asked softly, reading his thoughts with the intuition that had developed between them. Only that we didn't find this sooner, he replied, pulling her close. What about you? Give up a military career, become a fugitive, throw in your lot with a species your people barely tolerate. Any second thoughts? None. Her arms circled his waist, and she rested her head against his shoulder in a gesture that had become achingly familiar. My old life was about conquest and control. This is about creation and hope. I know which I prefer. A chime from the ship's communication system interrupted their moment. Elena's voice carried a note of excitement. We're receiving transmissions from the inner systems, multiple ships requesting coordinates and permission to join the colony. How many? Jonah asked. 17 so far, and the number's climbing. Mixed human and Altarian crews. Apparently word is spreading faster than we expected. Kira squeezed Jonah's hand, her eyes bright with possibility. It seems we're not the only ones ready for something new. Over the following weeks, as more ships arrived and the first settlement took shape on the planet's largest continent, Jonah watched their impossible dream become reality. The colony they named Haven grew from a handful of prefabricated shelters to a thriving community where species barriers were breaking down through simple proximity and shared labor. He found his role naturally, part engineer, part mediator, helping solve the technical challenges of building infrastructure that could serve both human and Altarian needs. Kira, meanwhile, had evolved from military commander to civilian leader, her strategic mind and natural authority helping organize their diverse population into a functioning society. The quantum resonance generators are online, Jonah reported, during one of their evening planning sessions. The leadership council was small, just 6 individuals representing both species, but their decisions would shape the future of interspecies cooperation. We should have full power to the residential sectors by tomorrow. Excellent, said Marcus Torres, their human agricultural coordinator. The first crop yields are exceeding projections. We'll be food independent within the year. The orbital defense grid is also progressing, added Kira's former aide, Commander Thex Nalvor, one of the few Altarian military officers who had joined their cause. If Admiral Thane decides to come looking for us, we'll be ready. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Kira said diplomatically, though Jonah knew she shared Thex's concerns. Their sanctuary was only as safe as their ability to defend it. Later, alone in their shared quarters overlooking the settlement, Kira and Jonah talked about the future with the easy intimacy of partners who had learned to trust each other completely. The children born here will be the first generation to grow up truly bilingual, Kira mused, watching human and Altarian families interact in the community spaces below. They'll think of cooperation between our species as normal, natural. Revolutionary, Jonah agreed. In the best possible way. She turned from the window to face him, her expression serious. There's something I need to tell you, something I've been putting off. Jonah felt a flutter of concern. What is it? The Codex contains more than just star maps. There are genetic records, biological compatibility matrices. She paused, seeming to gather her courage. Our species are more similar than anyone suspected. With the right medical support, we could... The implications hit him like a physical blow. Are you saying... I'm saying that what we have together, it could be more than just symbolic. We could have a family, Jonah. Children who belong to both our peoples. He stared at her, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was suggesting. Not just political alliance or romantic partnership, but true biological union. The creation of something entirely new. Is that what you want? He asked quietly. Her smile was answer enough, but she spoke anyway. I want everything with you. A life, a future, children who will carry the best of both our worlds. She took his hands in hers. What do you want? Jonah looked out at the settlement they had built together, thinking of all the impossible things that had already become possible through determination and love. I want to wake up every morning for the rest of my life knowing that we changed the galaxy just by refusing to accept the way things were. When he kissed her, it tasted of promises and new beginnings, of star maps and storm-swept nights and the brave decision to build something beautiful in the darkness between worlds. Outside their window, Haven continued to grow, its lights a beacon of hope in the cosmic night. And in the quiet of their quarters, two beings from different worlds began planning a future that would span the stars themselves. The galaxy was vast and often hostile, but they had found something worth fighting for in each other. And in doing so, they had created something that could outlast empires and reshape the very meaning of what it meant to be human, or Altarian, or simply alive in a universe full of infinite possibilities. Their love story had become the foundation for something greater than either of them had imagined, and it was only the beginning.